A meme is not an internet funny thing. The term was coined by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins in his 1976 book The Selfish Gene. It was originally used to describe how cultural information spreads and evolves in a manner similar to genes in the evolution of nature, while trying to make an example of a speculative unit for other types of evolution, which he called replicators. In his view, just as genetic information propagated biological traits, memetic information did the same for cultural elements, such as ideas, symbols, practices, or anything that could influence culture. The concept of memes was revolutionary, as it provided a framework that could give a way to study how society could evolve. Even if Dawkins didn't really care about that personally, he was just making an example of replicators. Whatever, good for him, I guess. But as time passed, other scientists liked it a lot, so it started to spread a perspective that allowed the empirical examination of how human culture changes over time. The concept of memetics gained more traction after the late 1980s, as researchers began to explore its potential to explain the spread of cultural phenomena, particularly evolutionary psychologists and anthropologists. During this time, scholars began brainstorming with the idea of memes, seeing them as units of evolution that could be studied and analyzed through the laws of Darwinian theory. Initial memetics was mainly speculative and theoretical. Few rigorous empirical tests were conducted, but the seeds for an emerging field were sown, like mathematical themas by Douglas Hofstadter, which used the concept in connection to the idea of how consciousness could evolve through the development of complex metaphors, analogies, to understand relations in reality. Ideas such as cultural transmission, selection, viruses, and replication of behavior through imitation began to filter into academic discourse. We researchers were keen to connect it to broader evolutionary and psychological theories, but the discipline had not taken yet solid roots in the mainstream scientific community. As the 1990s arrived, memetics began to get more attention, with various researchers attempting to explore the concept more rigorously. Various publications started to shape the discipline. Books such as The Meme Machine by Susan Blackmore and the writings of Daniel Dennett built a theory of how memes and ideas are central to the evolution of cognition. Another popular book was Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody, which explored the potential of studying viral propagation of information between minds, which is also the guy who wrote the code for the first version of Microsoft Word. The more you know. Evolutionary biologists, sociologists, marketers began to experiment with its application in a range of subjects, including language, social behavior, advertisement, and even the spread of religion. The term meme became more known, and various papers and studies explored how cultural elements could evolve in the same way that genes did. But by that time, memetics had started to be taken more seriously within the field of evolutionary psychology and social sciences, even though it still faced skepticism from many researchers. There was, however, a growing interest in how memes could explain the behavior of large groups of people, and how trends, ideas, and movements could spread. That's around when memetics began to extend beyond academia and fully entered the world of corporations and governments' intelligence. From the late 1990s, the concept of memetic engineering had developed already. Levius Rolando explored it alongside John Sokol while at the Morgan Weisler think tank in Hollywood, and later employed it with Gibran Burchett while working for Sony in 1999 to find ways to promote the hip-hop group Wu-Tang Clan. Through the development of marketing strategies, aesthetics, and trend research, alongside the help of street teams of fans organized to promote the artist in exchange for rewards, they laid the ground for the research. It's well documented how later Gibran Burchett moved to work on hydroponics to create solutions for sustainable food production in cities. John Sokol continued to work with tech companies and robotics, and Rolando worked for many companies all around the world, with many influential figures, such as Michael Jackson, also developing core strategies that influenced marketing of the mobile age, Latin music labels, and intelligence agencies. The concept of memetics gained even more traction, especially as the internet began to emerge as a significant cultural force. But suddenly, scientists started not finding common ground, some arguing to analyze memes as physical structures, others purely as ideas, and methods to perform empirical research were called inconclusive or unknown. But from the end of the 1990s to the start of the 2000s is when memetics started to die as a field, and entered the realm of occult studies by governments and corporations, in secret, to have an advantage on competition, losing more and more presence in public research. Even if all the while, memetics as a framework actually started to become an essential tool for understanding how to influence culture and the evolution of society. Suddenly, with great resources on people's documentation and with the rise of the World Wide Web, it seemed increasingly easy to study the spread of cultural phenomena. The internet has a complex and transformative history that began in the 1960s, with the creation of ARPANET, founded by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Under the US Department of Defense, later renamed Department of War by President Donald J. Trump. The primary goal of ARPANET was to develop a communicative network that could withstand nuclear attacks, allowing military personnel to communicate in a decentralized way. What started as military experimentation soon evolved into a powerful tool for academic research collaborations all across the globe. As the early ARPANET connected universities and research institutions, it laid the groundwork for what would become the web. The vision for the Internet after the military development was to create an open, decentralized, and accessible network that could connect individuals across the world. This promise was revolutionary. Anyone could exchange information freely, breaking down barriers of time and space. It was seen as a way to democratize access to information, enabling individuals and groups from around the world to share ideas, collaborate, and create. Early adopters envisioned the Internet as an heterotopic space, a subsystem that subverts the rules of the outside, where censorship could be avoided and free speech could flourish. The initial vision was one of intellectual freedom, connectivity, and equality. The idea was championed by figures like John Perry Barlow, who in his Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace of 1996 argued that cyberspace should remain free from the laws and regulations of governments, seen as a decentralized, open space for creativity, communication, and innovation, where individuals could exchange ideas without the constraints of political or geographic limitations. Early communities were often niche, and were connected primarily through text-based forums. Some of the large first-scale communities included BBS dedicated to everything from programming to music, gaming, politics, etc. The 1990s marked the beginning of the Internet's expansion, beyond academic and government use, into the general public. This era saw the advent of the first graphical web browsers, which allowed a broader audience to access the Internet. People started to get more connected than ever before. However, as the Internet grew, the increasing control exerted by corporations and governments started killing the vibe of cyberspace independence more and more. The dot-com boom of the late 1990s saw the surge in investments to Internet-based businesses, giving rise to the first wave of major tech companies like Google, Amazon, eBay, and Yahoo. Although it gave room to more platforms for people to create, excitement around the Internet grew exponentially, and the possibility of connected worlds seemed promising. This was actually the beginning of its instant downfall. People felt like it was a golden era of online freedom, as the Internet seemed to live up to its promise of providing anyone with the tools to create and communicate. By the early 2000s, broadband access expanded globally, further democratizing access to the Internet. Online communities continued to grow, and the ability to connect with people from all over the world was realized in social networking sites, forums, and digital marketplaces. The promise of the Internet as a force for global interconnectedness seemed, at least in part, fulfilled. The first, now called Internet funny memes, started to spread, although they were not called memes by users at the time. But this rapid expansion was not just about technology or connection. It was a major shift in how culture could be studied, and those who wished to shape it noticed while nobody else did. The Internet just allowed for real-time experimentation on how quickly certain ideas could spread within online communities, opening up new opportunities for memetic studies. To study, profit of user data, and make use of it for the development of AI. Marketers began to grasp the importance of memes in shaping consumer behavior, while intelligence agencies explored how memes could be used for psychological warfare, influencing public perception and viral disinformation. As the Internet grew, corporations had explored its potential for business and marketing using memetics. By the second half of the 2000s, major tech companies had begun to dominate the online landscape. This data-driven approach allowed corporations to refine their advertisement strategies, create targeted content, and, in effect, monetize the Internet, studying memetics behind the scenes, leading to the phenomena that Ms. Zuboff calls in her essay by the same name surveillance capitalism, where the main capital is the user's data. Selling people's data became a business itself. Data brokers got rich. But somehow, in the meantime, still in the 2000s, memetics is said to have continued to struggle to evolve as both a theoretical or empirical research method. In the scientific community, there were challenges in making memetics a formal academic discipline, being eventually viewed by critics as a fringe theory, a pseudoscience even. That's a little crap, I say! There were few known attempts in the scientific community to rigorously test the hypothesis put forth by early proponents. As a result, memetics lost much of its academic credibility, relegating the field to niche corners of academia or pop science. However, its practical application in marketing, intelligence, and politics became increasingly kept hidden from the public. I suppose. I mean, it's not like I know or anything. Well, right? Whatever. Marketers, advertisements began to leverage memetics to create viral campaigns, understanding how certain cultural elements could quickly gain traction across social media platforms. On the other hand, intelligence agencies explored memetics as a tool for information warfare, aiming to spread particular ideas or disinformation throughout targeted online campaigns. Like anyone could have found this stuff, it was public online in the 2020s. It was all over, just no one cared. Most of the information was public, imagine what was not. The potential to influence public opinion through the study of replicators became powerful for institutions, for those on top. The colonization of online spaces by corporations marked the beginning of a shift from the internet as a public good to a more commercialized and controlled matrix or infrastructure. As more people logged online, the idea of the internet as an open, decentralized platforms eroded. Corporations took advantage of the internet's vast potential for surveillance, user profiting, and control. This is where the early optimism of the internet gave way to concerns about privacy, censorship, and corporate influence. Corporations increasingly became gatekeepers of online content, controlled the flow of information, and dictated the terms of engagement for countless users. Those platforms developed algorithms designed to maximize engagement, often prioritizing sensational or polarizing content that drove traffic and increased profits, while worsening cognition, thus shaping the meme matrix towards more entropy and leading to increasing susceptibility in the public. There were known studies on how the brain and the body can be altered by an unchecked or harmful flow of information, what some called brain rot. The more people used these platforms, the more corporations learned about their behavior, references, and beliefs with memetics. Ask them to declassify the research if you think it's crap. I bet. I bet my ass on it. 2007 is when the word meme started to shift its meaning. I couldn't get into contact with the ones responsible, even though I tried. I haven't found any evidence it was an engineered effort, but it certainly ended up acting as a counter-meme that the elite exploited. The responsible seems to be the website Know Your Meme, beginning in 2007 as a YouTube series produced by the Rocket Boom YouTube channel. Jamie Wilkinson and Rocket Boom CEO Andrew Barron focused on documenting specific online memetic phenomena, tracing its origins and spread across internet communities, starting from a special episode series when they were out of ideas. It expanded into an online wiki-style database in 2008 and its own YouTube channel, combining community submissions with editorial research to catalog viral videos and internet trends. The first video, where it seems the word was used to refer to internet funny things, seems to be a Rocket Boom video called The Internet Alphabet, where it was used in superposition with the dramatic chipmunk meme clip for the letter M. By the end of 2010, the project had grown beyond the original web series and attracted significant attention as a centralized internet meme database documenting memes with timelines, sources, and spread patterns, facing cyberattacks by forum users of Kiwi Farms, who saw their efforts as spreading their internet niche culture to normies. In early 2011, several of the original creators left the project, amid internal tensions and disagreements over management, and later that year, the website was sold to the Cheeseburger Network for 7 figures, transitioning from independent Rocket Boom origins to corporate ownership. Know Your Meme's entries quickly became the most cited source for meme histories in journalism, scholarship, and popular media, because it offered searchable documentation of internet culture, its origins and spread, which is deeply tied to irony, effectively establishing how many people learned what a meme was, by association to how others were using it online. Viral things. Over time, this institutionalization contributed to a narrower, popular definition of memes, tied to shareable internet artifacts cataloged on the site, rather than the broader concept of cultural replicators, originally proposed in memetic theory, because mainstream reference to Know Your Meme shaped public usage and academic citations alike, probably just because they wanted to make more views. The 2010s marked the last critical shift in the internet's evolution. Governments and corporations began to implement rigorous controls over online spaces more than ever before. Platforms introduced policies that banned certain types of speech, hiding behind the excuse of trying to prevent hate and misinformation, which I think is important, but at the will of the community, like in the cases of online piracy or the hidden web. While governments around the world sought to regulate online content and enforce censorship laws, it all played to the elite's end. While censorship was already thought of a problem for authoritarianist regimes, it began to creep into the walking corpses of Western democracies as well. Corporations and governments used memetics to challenge the freedom once offered by the internet's promise, turning it into a battleground for surveillance, data mining, control, to create AI to enslave, or that could have reflected all the hate humanity fed to it. After the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018, something fundamental broke. It made explicit what had previously felt abstract for the public. User behavior data was not just hosted, but harvested, modeled, and weaponized at scale. This triggered regulatory backlash, outrage, and a collapse of narrative control. At the center of that collapse was Mark Zuckerberg. In memetic terms, Zuckerberg became seen more as a symbol than a person. Online discourse increasingly framed him as inhuman, a robot, an android, a lizard-wearing skin. These weren't just insults, they were counter-memes, reducing his legitimacy by stripping him of relatability and agency. Once the public perception of a person is flattened, anything they say becomes noise, which then led to a key shift in his presentation. Up to that point, Zuckerberg had openly rejected style and personal branding, Others had made a movie about his life, which already had spread by 2009 a critical view of his persona as a thief of others' ideas. He repeatedly stated that he wore the same type of clothes every day to avoid wasting cognitive energy on fashion, a classic Silicon Valley rationalist aesthetic signaling efficiency. That persona worked when Facebook was framed as humble. It failed once Facebook was framed as power. After the backlash, the persona changed drastically. Zuckerberg did not simply act more human, he adopted specific, high-signal aesthetics. He began training publicly in MMA and Jiu-Jitsu on his dojo boat, posting about discipline, combat sports, and physical resilience. He showcased rural imagery on his social media, raising cattle, smoking meat, working his land. He appeared in gold chains and designer fits, the opposite of the bland look he once celebrated. This was obviously not random. These signals map cleanly onto alpha male post-crisis masculinity narratives that already perform well in the contemporary meme ecosystem of the time, like strength, self-sufficiency, and dominance. In my terminology, this is a selector shift, a shift in target audience, abandoning a failed identity cluster and aligning with one that replicates better under conditions of distrust, populist resentment, and anti-elite sentiment. The important point is that whether or not this image is authentic, after being framed as inhuman and mocked, Zuckerberg re-entered culture by recoding himself. The use of identity traits as adaptive cultural replicators in response to selector pressures is an example of memetic engineering at the level of a persona, the identity that one shows to the world, opposite to its shadow, which are the parts of one's identity that are hidden or that one can't face about themselves. The later state of the internet has created a generation that is increasingly dependent on algorithmic-driven platforms for information and entertainment. People are bombarded with targeted content, often designed to influence their thoughts, opinions, and actions. Despite the growing evidence of the dangers of online manipulation, the public remains largely unaware or compliant to the extent of it. But one could learn to use its tools against the system. Having grown up in such a cultural environment and matrix, Generation C describes a cohort defined not by age but by digital connectivity, an interconnected global cultural content. A group of individuals who create, share, and shape media culture through constant engagement with platforms and communities. I propose to expand the term to anyone born from the Generation X onward, as that's when the information age started to peak, and such people spawned. Rather than traditional generational markers tied to birth years zeitgeist conditions of the meme matrix, members of Gen Z shared the cultural media connectivity across multiple gens. Social expression and collective agency effectively blurred the line between passive audience and active participant in cultural and political discourse. Research characterizes this group as deeply integrated with social technologies and capable of reshaping communication patterns. Media consumption and collective identity through participatory practices such as remixing and virtual collaborations. The internet lowers the transaction costs of collective action by enabling individuals to coalesce into distributed movements that challenge established structures and mainstream narratives. Online activism can use communication technologies, social media, hashtags, forums to facilitate coordinated campaigns, rapid dissemination of information, and decentralized organization. Where earlier forms of protest relied on physical gatherings and formal hierarchies, Gen Z's activism can leverage digital networks to create networked advocacy, swarm intelligence, a type of engagement where users are linked through shared platforms and cultural symbols, like in the case of Black Lives Matter or Free Palestine protests, enabling rapid response and crowdsourced mobilization even by large unconnected masses of people coordinated in small groups. This form of activism has been visible in movements that used online tools to coordinate hashtags, petitions, digital outreach, government disclosure, and cross-platform engagement to build pressures on governments and corporations. I can't state enough how the public blindness to what memes truly are and how they function continues to be a major issue in the fight for reclaiming control over their lives. People in 2025 joked about a great meme reset, thinking it was an impossible task to make old memes somewhat come back. Even cringe. Completely oblivious that that's literally what memetics can teach you. To manipulate the evolution of memes, duh. I did everything I could think of in the months of December and January 2025-2026, but I miscalculated how much the counter meme of the meme reset event itself being cringe was already spreading, naively thinking I could use it as a bait. Let's say people's reactions were not what I expected, but my plan ended with the posting of one last video essay. I still hoped, maybe, that could have reached someone, somehow. Nonetheless, what internet memes were thought to be are not just, in my opinion, jokes or viral trends. They are deeply embedded parts of the cultural environment, matrix, and mindscape that shaped Generation C. Until memetics is widely recognized, the world remains in danger, increasingly controlled by powerful groups that are interested only to push the status quo to their own ends, exploiting the public's unawareness to what memes really are. Was this a conspiracy theory? You might be thinking. I mean, withholding groundbreaking science that teaches how society evolves looks like a crime against humanity, if you ask me. I don't know. But to answer this question, we need to be on the same page on what a conspiracy really means. be it an objective truth, a speculation, or a myth. Throughout human history, conspiracies have shaped not only the course of events, but also the way in which the public interprets the world. A conspiracy, in its simplest form, is an agreement between two or more individuals to commit an illegal or harmful act in secret. The importance of conspiracies lies in their ability to influence perception, power dynamics, and the flow of information. However, what makes some conspiracies more prominent than others often hinges on the evidence available, the circumstances in which they unfold, and the response of those in power. From ancient civilizations to the modern era, conspiracies have been a powerful tool for those seeking power, control, and destruction. One of the earliest known conspiracies dates back to ancient Rome, during the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE. His murder was orchestrated by a group of Roman senators who believed that his growing power and influence threatened the Republic. The conspirators, led by Brutus and Cassius, sought to restore the Republic's traditional power structures by eliminating the self-appointed dictator. The assassination was seen as both a betrayal and a necessary act to preserve Roman values. The aftermath of Cassius' death, however, led to the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus, proving that the conspiracy did not have the desired effect of restoring the Republic, but instead created a new form of autocracy. Similarly, the Gunpowder Plot of 1605 in England is another example of how a group sought to overthrow a government. Some English Catholics planned to assassinate King James I and blow up the Britain's House of Parliament. Most importantly, one guy, Fawkes. This guy whose face became V for Vendetta's mask, the anonymous symbol. This dude's aura became a meme for real. Anyway, their goal was to end Protestant rule in England and restore Catholic leadership. I know, not that radical for the 21st century, but at the time it was a huge deal. The plot was discovered before it could be executed, and the conspirators were arrested and executed. The Gunpowder Plot became a symbol of resistance against government oppression, and became commemorated annually. In the UK, it became a holiday called Guy Fawkes Night, where they burn a puppet dressed like him? Anyway, the conspiracy also highlighted the deep religious divides within England at the time, which would continue to shape the nation's political landscape for centuries. The 20th century saw the rise of more complex and far-reaching conspiracies, particularly in the realm of political intrigue. One of the most well-known historical examples of a conspiracy, later in the timeline of humanity, or to better call it now, conspiracy theories, is the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Originally, the conspiracy theory term simply referred to the speculation that someone conspired to achieve a certain end, often involving illegal or unethical actions. In this case, the official narrative, which attributed the killing to a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, has been consistently challenged by various theorists. These challenges include the idea that there were multiple shooters, and that the US government or powerful factions within it may have been involved in a cover-up, like what's happening now, What's notable here is how the official narrative persists alongside the alternative theories. There are some which do find evidence, like the assassination of Martin Luther King. King's family filed a civil lawsuit against Lloyd Yowers, a retired businessman who had publicly claimed he was part of a conspiracy to murder King. They were not seeking monetary damages, but rather a public affirmation of their belief that a US government conspiracy was behind the assassination. They won the lawsuit. But the government didn't confess to anything, allegedly, though. Another example comes from the Cold War period. One of the most striking instances was the alleged false flag operation known as Operation Northwoods. The classified documents from the US Department of Defense, or War, in the 1990s revealed that the military officials proposed a series of covert operations designed to provoke a war with Cuba. The plan involved staging terrorist attacks, such as hijacking planes or attacking American military bases, which will then be blamed on Cuba. These revelations shocked many, as they demonstrated that the US government had, at least at some point, been willing to engage in acts of terrorism to manipulate public opinion and justify military action. This is a perfect example of how conspiracies, real or imagined, are inherently linked to power structures and the manipulation of public opinion. The historical importance of these operations lies in the confirmation that government officials were willing to orchestrate events that will justify the conflict. It's a fact that speaks directly to the nature of conspiracies and the length to which certain powers may go to further their agendas. The declassification of similar instances has led to a growing recognition that conspiracies, even those involving governments, can be based in truth. Furthermore, such revelations invite the question, whether conspiracies remain hidden from the public eye. It becomes clear that there is a vast divide between public knowledge and the inner workings of powerful institutions, one that fuels speculation and the spread of conspiracy theories. In the modern era, the events of September 11, 2001, provide another example of a conspiracy theory that remains central to debate over the manipulation of information. The 9/11 attacks, which led to the death of nearly 3,000 people, are widely understood throughout the official narrative of Al-Qaeda responsibility. However, numerous conspiracy theories have emerged, questioning the nature of the attacks. Some theorists suggest that the US government had prior knowledge of the attacks, while others claim that the events themselves were a false flag operation, orchestrated by the US, as a pretext to justify the war on terror and to tighten control over civil liberties. These theories have been fueled by the discovery of declassified documents such as the Pentagon Papers, which exposed instances of government deception, misdirection, in the lead-up to wars and conflicts. For instance, the fact that there was documented consideration of staging a terrorist attack to provide a pretext for war raises possibility that similar tactics might have been used in other instances of geopolitical conflict. The persistence of these questions, coupled with the evidence that has come to light in the form of declassified files, challenges the public's trust in official narratives and provides ground for the spread of conspiracy theories. One of the key elements in the evolution of conspiracies has been the shifting meaning of the term conspiracy theory itself. Over time, the term has been weaponized, with the term conspiracy theorist often used as a pejorative, or for baselessness. This shift was not accidental, but instead a result of a deliberate effort by government agencies, notably the CIA, to undermine public confidence in those who questioned official narratives. The classified documents show, again, that in 1977, the CIA issued a memo known as the CIA Dispatch, which explicitly stated that conspiracy theories regarding the assassination of President Kennedy should be countered by calling them theories without merit. The memo recommended a media campaign that aimed to delegitimize those who questioned the official story, suggesting that they were driven by paranoia or irrationality. This was an example of an organized effort by the USA to manipulate public opinion by dismissing dissenting viewpoints as the product of unstable or extreme thinkers. There are countless others in these and other governments, like when Edward Snowden exposed the government was spying on its citizens all the time, but that also got forgotten pretty quickly. In essence, this strategy not only isolated conspiracy theories from serious discourse, but also positioned them as inherently suspect, often creating a social stigma around anyone who dared to question official narratives. By labeling alternative views as if a conspiracy theory was a bad word, the CIA and other powerful institutions succeeded in turning skepticism into a form of social taboo. In this way, the term conspiracy theory was transformed from a neutral descriptor of a potential truth to a powerful tool used to silence criticism and dismiss alternative viewpoints. In many cases, the mere suggestion that a person might believe in a conspiracy theory is enough to discredit their credibility, whether or not their claims are backed by evidence. This process has served to ensure that those who challenge the status quo are often viewed as irrational or paranoid, regardless of the merit of their arguments. This shift is still apparent in contemporary politics, especially in the United States. For example, when Cover King Trump referred to the Epstein files as a hoax, he was engaging in a well-established tactic to dismiss conspiracies as fabrications, despite the fact that many of his supporters have historically subscribed to conspiracy theories such as QAnon, where online people believed that pizza place was tied to a ring of rich satanic pedophiles and that Trump was a hero sent by God to defeat the deep state, which all led to the events of January 6, where the Capitol was stormed in an attempted coup, fueled by Trump's spread of the idea that the election was fraudulent. Morgan Wurster was granted a meeting with Trump to suggest strategies for his election beforehand, and suggested he appeal to the fact that states can regard him as their elected leader regardless of the full results, saying he should have listened to what he told him later on Twitter, or X. It's important to note that Trump later filed a lawsuit against a news network, believing that his words were misinterpreted, that the footage was edited to make it seem like he was agitating the people more than he really was. But I guess you weren't there, so you wouldn't know, right? I guess we weren't there, so we can talk about that. I don't know. We can say that he pardoned most of the people that did that, when he later got elected again, obviously, after attempting to... No, he didn't, okay, he didn't. He says he didn't. The paradox here is that while conspiracy theories are widely viewed with skepticism by the mainstream, they also remain an enduring feature of political discourse, particularly when they are employed by populist figures seeking to challenge the established narrative. Such historical facts reveal a long-standing tradition of government manipulation of public perception. It is essential to recognize the ways in which the term conspiracy theory has been weaponized, not just to dismiss alternative views, but to maintain control over the narrative. The twisted framing continues to affect public perception over established narratives today, serving to protect the elite and discredit those who question it. Just like in the case of how the word meme shifted online in meaning. This is an example of a counter-meme. A counter-meme is a deliberately created or not cultural unit that inhibits or counteracts the spread of another within the same selector, which I coined the system made of replicators that sets evolutionary rules, which can be environments, matrices, or mindscapes. Those idea counter memes function as ones that reduce the transmissibility or spread of a competing idea meme by altering how people can react to it later. The term was coined by internet lawyer and author Mike Godwin when he developed Godwin's law as a memetic strategy to counteract what he saw as a rampant invocation of Nazi comparisons in online discussions. Godwin describes his law as an experiment in memetic engineering, deliberately seeding the counter-meme into early internet forums to diminish the frequency of hyperbolic Nazi references and shift discourse norms. Godwin's law itself states that as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. The formulation was coined in 1990 and published in the 1994 Wired article called Meme Counter Meme, where Godwin explained that he created this rule to make participants aware of how they were propagating the problematic meme of Nazi analogies. The counter meme that encouraged users to self-correct and reflect on the rhetorical impact of their language, slowing the spread of the trivializing meme. In memetic terms, a counter meme does not merely oppose another idea, it alters the cultural selector in such a way that the original meme's replication becomes less successful. Godwin's experiment showed that intentional memetic design could influence cultural patterns of communication by giving people a framework to recognize and resist a meme's unchecked propagation. The term conspiracy, conspiracy theory, or conspiracy myth, which I coined, are often used interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings that affect how they are understood and discussed in society. Understanding these distinctions is crucial when analyzing how historical events, secrecy, and public trust influence the formation of conspiracy memes. This video is definitely gonna get demonetized, but it doesn't matter because I will have donated everything anyway. That's a bummer, I guess. Like we already said before, a conspiracy refers to a secretive plan to achieve a particular goal, usually illegal or harmful to others. On the other hand, a conspiracy theory is a speculative explanation of an event or situation that involves a conspiracy, motivated maybe by supposed evidence, but lacking definitive proof. More of a conspiracy hypothesis in a scientific sense. In science, a theory is an hypothesis that has been well empirically verified by others' experiments. The popular meaning of theory refers to the former idea of a speculative explanation of any kind. Then, a conspiracy myth, I propose, takes the notion of a conspiracy theory a step further. It involves a belief held in a conspiracy that is grounded in little to no empirical or factual basis, but is nonetheless culturally significant. Or believed due to cognitive dissonance, the state of being unaware of the contradiction in one's beliefs due to emotions. These myths are often passed down through generations or across culture, evolving with time and adapting to new fears and uncertainties. An example of a conspiracy myth would be the belief in the existence of a shadowy new world order that controls world governments and orchestrates a global cabal. Bet you heard about it. Conspiracy myths can be traced back to ancient times, such as the myth of the blood libel. This conspiracy myth claimed that Jews will murder Christian children and use their blood for ritualistic purposes, despite no evidence to support these accusations. As far as we know, the myth became a powerful tool for anti-Semitic propaganda, leading to violent persecution. Similarly, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fabricated document from the early 20th century by the Russian secret police Okhrana, spread all the way to inspire Hitler. The rise of conspiracy myths was particularly pronounced after World War II, a period marked by intense secrecy and geopolitical maneuvering. During the Cold War, the world was divided into spheres of influence, with the US and the Soviet Union vying for dominance. This competition led to a significant increase in government secrecy, as intelligence agencies, such as the CIA or the KGB, conducted covert operations across the globe. The secrecy of these operations fostered a sense of distrust globally, although the reasons for the rise in secrecy after World War II were multi-faced. The war itself had exposed the vulnerabilities of nations. Governments sought to maintain control over information to prevent the spread of knowledge that could potentially undermine their power or security. The development of covert military operations and espionage during the Cold War required the withholding of information from the public, and so on, but I don't like that people must know in order for society to evolve beyond the fear of the other. These myths gained traction because they offered simple explanations for complex geopolitical developments, just like in ancient times. In times of uncertainty, people were more inclined to believe in those myths as a way of making sense of their reality. Fear and mistrust of powerful institutions, coupled with the lack of transparency, led many to embrace the idea that powerful forces were manipulating events behind the scenes. You figure. The role of secrecy in fueling conspiracy myths continues to be relevant in contemporary society. In recent years, high-profile events like the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2020 US presidential election, and the Epstein scandal have sparked conspiracy theories and myths. These events are marked by complex and sometimes contradictory narratives, and the lack of clear answers has fueled the rise of alternative explanations that are often grounded in misinformation. A confusion itself is exploited to make people more manipulable. The words used to describe conspiracy theories, myths, and the events they surround got so twisted over time that discussions about these topics became a literal mess. What was once a term for reasonable suspicion then became synonymous with irrationality. The line between conspiracy theory, and conspiracy myth is not always clear. A deeper understanding of society can be achieved by remembering these distinctions and investigating events without succumbing to emotion. One can live in the superposition of possible truths until grasped, live without all the answer, but also seek the truth nonetheless. Now we reach the most important chapter part. Don't lose me here. Discordianism is described commonly as a satirical religion that emerged in the late 1950s, rooted in absurdity and chaos. It promoted the idea that disorder is just as natural and valuable as order. Discordians worshipped the ancient Greek goddesses of chaos, Eris, and feared the god of order, Greyface. The influence of Discordianism extends far beyond its origin as a supposed mock religion. It played a pivotal role in the development of conspiracy culture. The writers thought that if enough wacky stories spread, people would have come to the realization of the absurdity of the conspiracy myths they were getting mailed all the time while working at Playboy. The Illuminatus trilogy, written by Robert Shaw and Robert Anton Wilson, is a fictional work that blends all those stories they were getting mailed by random people, occultism, and countercultural ideologies. Its narrative weaves an intricate web of secret societies, mind control, and political intrigue, centering around the idea of a hidden powerful elite that secretly controls world events. The Illuminati. While the trilogy is widely regarded as a piece of speculative fiction, it became an influential cultural artifact, blurring the lines between fiction and reality, and indirectly spreading more myths in the MEMETICS. While initially intended as satire, the narrative created a fertile ground for the spread of conspiracy theories. The book's fictional portrayal of secret societies controlling world events inspired real-world conspiracy enthusiasts to build upon those ideas, weaving their own versions of the Illuminati and similar groups into modern conspiracy discourse, which were specifically chosen by the authors, since such an organization existed in the past, so it will give a bit of believability to their fiction. Look how that turned out. Another important topic to our discussion is occult traditions. Magic, with a K, is a term that differentiates itself from traditional magic, things that seem to break the rules of reality or stage show trickery, emphasizing the intentional use of rituals and symbols to influence the world in ways that transcend conventional understanding, often through a mythic framework, by influencing rituals or symbols to achieve desired outcomes inside objective or subjective realities. Rooted in occult traditions, specifically the ones of Aleister Crowley, who used to entice others into sex rituals in order to reach enlightenment through gnosis. Magic has long been associated with secret knowledge, spiritual rituals, and manipulation of energies in unseen realms. The roots can be traced to ancient traditions, including alchemy, astrology, and ceremonial rituals. Chaos magic, on the other hand, emerged in 1870 as a radical departure from traditional magic. It was created as a response to the perceived limitations of established occult systems, aiming to provide a flexible, pragmatic, empirical approach to achieving results. The chaos magic movement was led by figures like Robert Anton Wilson, already influential throughout his work with Discordianism, and Peter J. Carroll, whose writings promoted the idea that belief itself could be used to influence reality. Chaos magic does not necessarily reject myth, but it rejects the notion that rituals or symbols are inherently powerful. Rather, it posits that the practitioner's belief in the ritual is what imbues it with power. This flexible, experimental approach to magic allows practitioners to adopt any system, tool, or symbol they find effective in achieving their goals. Chaos magicians often borrow from a wide range of traditions, from Western occultism to pop culture, and they are encouraged to embrace a mindset of experimentation and adaptability. Meme magic, introduced by Arkir Parkwood, is an extension of the principle of chaos magic, applying them to memes, units of cultural evolution. It involves the intentional use of memes to influence reality by manipulating collective consciousness and shaping public discourse, among other mythical beliefs of the author in spirits and such other things, which are not relevant to our discussion really. I encourage anyone to read that book through a metaphorical lens. In this case, meme magic operates in much the same way as traditional magic, but with memes as vehicles for influence. It's an idea that takes advantage of the viral, contagious nature of online culture, and so it was eventually found by the forum 4chan. Its boards, where users can write anonymously, served as breeding grounds for internet subcultures, where users created and spread internet joke memes that often contain deeply ironic or satirical content. Over time, these memes began to take on political or social significance, with users intentionally using memes as tools for influencing public opinion and even political outcomes. Here, one of the most notable instances of meme magic in action happened in the political landscape surrounding the first election of Donald Trump again. Can we stop talking about this guy? These guys thought he was funny. Okay, literally, ironically. They thought, how fun would it be if he won? On 4chan poll board, which stands for politically incorrect, users openly discussed using memes to elect Trump, viewing the viral nature of internet funny memes as a powerful tool for shaping public perception. Some got the deeper non-mythical layer of memetics, but most joined the so-called cult of Kek, who worshipped Pepe the Frog, thinking he was a reincarnation of the ancient Egyptian god of chaos, Kek. which was also a famous funny internet meme that stood for you laugh, originating from World of Warcraft. Kek. Haha, kek. 77777777. The internet meme Pepe the Frog was initially an innocuous cartoon character meant to reflect any archetype the user would project onto it with their edits, and even before as a comic chill dude character created by Matt Fury, known for his catchphrase, "Feels good, man," that he said once when taking a pee. It was co-opted by those which 4chan users called normies, so those 4chan users tried to spread the most terrible images of Pepe in order to stop them from using it as their memes. But just like Discordianism, this had adverse effects, giving institutions a reason to label it as a hate symbol and giving those who could use it to promote their hate a propaganda tool. While meme magic is often associated with online subcultures and countercultural movements, it's important in our discussion since the strategies employed by internet users to promote Trump, ironically or not, through the creation and dissemination of memes, demonstrated an example of how chaos magic principles were applied in the digital age, by manipulating symbols, narratives, and belief systems in a decentralized manner. Meme magic has shown itself to be a powerful tool for influencing political opinion. Such similar tools are employed by governments like Russia, among others, to fake internet account farms to influence public political discourse, like in Crimea or US elections. This chaos magic book that hides insights about memetics directly relates to government military memetic research if stripped of shamanic wording. That's what I think, at least. One of the most intriguing intersections between chaos magic and memetics is found in the work of Robert Anton Wilson and other chaos magicians who were researching the effects of belief on culture. Their writings, when stripped down of more esoteric terminology, can reveal insights directly applicable to government and military efforts to manipulate public opinion. Directly comparable to the documents released by DARPA, Tutorial to Military Memetics, using research from 2005 to 2010, which explains how to influence the inside and outside of the mind with the spread of memes, subjective or objective reality. Or the 2005 proposal for a US Marine Corps Meme Warfare Center, intended to harness memes for influence operations and narrative advantage. NATO, which also incorporated this approach within its Strategic Communication Center of Excellence, framing memetic tactics as part of broader information operations, designed to compete over ideas and narratives in digital spaces, or even the European Union and its Council of Foreign Affairs. There are various individual states which have adopted similar strategies, like the Taiwanese government explicitly assembled memetic engineering teams within the government to respond rapidly to disinformation campaigns and counter adversarial influence. With a humor over humor approach, the Taiwanese say, illustrating a formal institutional application of memetic methods hiding behind the counter meme. These insights offer a framework for understanding how memes, whether in the form of propaganda, psychological warfare, or even shitposts, can influence the meme matrix. In his work, particularly Prometheus Rising, Wilson discussed the concept of reality tunnels, an idea that posits that human beings interpret the world through subjective filters driven by frameworks, ideologies, myths, theories, values, lenses influenced by their beliefs and experiences. I call those mindscapes, the selectors of the mind. Those concepts, in the history of magic, mirror the idea of memes to memetics, which are also shaped by belief and can propagate through society by tapping into cognitive biases and perceptions. Just as chaos magic encourages practitioners to manipulate their own belief system, or that of others, to achieve results, memetics could have proven that idea empirically, if only it was not studied under the radar by those seeking to keep it for themselves. Like Elon Bad Father Musk, who literally told in interviews and tweeted he knew memetics, and coincidentally bought Twitter, renaming it to X, presenting himself as the paladin of free speech, while increasing censorship, boosting himself in the algorithm, using it as a propaganda machine, to manipulate the markets, collect data to build the Grok AI, etc. And then later named the Department of Government Efficiency after the Doge meme, using the known picture of an innocuous dog to sanitize the image of his operation about harnessing American citizens' data. Obviously personally appointed under, can you guess who? Donald Trump again. Military and intelligence agencies have long understood the power of belief systems in shaping public opinion, and chaos magic's emphasis on controlling and shifting belief is not far removed from the psyops that are routinely employed by governments to influence public sentiment. When looking at these intersections, one can see that magic and memetics share a common potential, influencing individuals at a deep psychological level to alter their thoughts, actions, or even physical states. Like MK Ultra. Okay, it was really heavy. It was a really heavy topic and I needed to treat it with respect. You need to treat stuff with respect when it matters. That's why I don't say the N-word. I don't care to. It's not funny. Makes me cringe. Makes me cringe. So, let's light it up a bit, okay? So, this is the coolest part of the video. Stick with me. So this is when, I know it sounds weird in the third person, but that's when Mike 1 comes into history. In the 2020s, they find the Memetic Magic book. They study everything they can about science and end up starting to write the very book you are reading. Or in this case, the very book you're watching, because this is an essay from the preface of the book. So basically, they wanted to find the literature to quote for where memetic engineering came from, since the authors are credited everywhere. So they found the old blog of Leveus Rolando and asked him in an email to know more, telling them that they were working on evolutionary research and investigating the history of memetics to write a book. Mr. Rolando asked who Mike worked for, and they answered something like, "I'm doing this for the love of the game." After seeing their work, Rolando saw potential in the occult scientific research Mike 1 had been developing. So that's when he proposed them to start working together. Yeah, true story, bro. Bye bye. Life has no meaning. The planet is dying. Death to society. This is just a funny video. This is just a funny video. This is just a funny video. Remember, kids, don't be manipulated.